folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Hey, folks. Thanks for joining me on the Jobs Podcast. Today, we've got a special treat. One of the benefits of having a podcast is you get to choose who the guests are and what the topics are. And this one is something that is of personal interest to me, Canine Search and Rescue. And we have a gentleman here today that has a lot of experience in this. So welcome, Scott.
Hi there. Glad to be here. Thanks.
So Scott, let's go ahead and start off with where you were born, your early upbringing, and just kind of walk us through that, your education, and how your career sort of materialized, and we'll just go from there.
Sounds great. So I was born in actually Arvada, Colorado, and spent my early years just doing the Colorado thing and heading up to the mountains. My family had a place up in Estes Park, Colorado. So as a kid, we grew up running around Estes Park, and then in the 80s, we moved around a bit. We ended up heading out to California, kind of like outside LA for a couple of years, and then we ended up in Chicago, outside of the city. That's where I kind of grew up in the sense of sixth grade through college, and went to school at Western Illinois and played soccer my whole life. And basically, as soon as I could finish my degree, which was physical education and education major, I had dreams of returning back to Colorado. So off I went back to Colorado, fresh with a diploma in hand, up into Estes Park. And that's kind of where I started my professional careers. I kind of landed there.
What was your first, you said your degree was in physical education. What was it?
Yeah, so my bachelor's degree was in education. I was a PE teacher.
Okay.
And that's where I spent kind of my beginning years as a career. And then I met my wife, and we were having fun doing adventures in Colorado and skiing on the weekends and rock climbing. And then I ended up wanting to do something a little bit more adventure outdoor based. I went to grad school in Georgia at a place called Georgia College and got my outdoor education administration master's degree. And then I got involved with university work, running outdoor programs and doing different adventures. And then that's what brought us back, my wife Amy and I, as hard as in the mountains or outdoors, one of the two. And so we were headed back to Colorado, and I got my career lifetime dream job at Colorado State University in Pueblo. And I was the director of the Outdoor Pursuits program and worked in student rec and taught in the outdoor leadership degree. Until we made a whole life family switch, and we traded mountain life for lake life. And our whole family moved out here to Table Rock, Missouri. It's in Shell Knob, where we live. And that's when I made the switch to be full-time EMT with Mercy, and then joined the Central Crossing Fire Department as a full-time firefighter. So 25 plus years as an educator, and then went full-time as a firefighter now.
Your education job, the outdoor programs, elaborate on that just a little bit. What exactly were you instructing people in? What types of things would you do?
Yeah. And that, it's like the greatest job, and you every day you're like, how do I get to do this? So I worked at the university, and in the university, there's the academic programs, and there was an outdoor leadership recreation curriculum, and then there was a student rec. So it was kind of cool because we combined the two. So students that would be learning the outdoor leadership curriculum, how to take people on trips, essentially be an outdoor educator guide, all those risk management, first aid and logistics and all the stuff that goes with that.
All right.
And then we would be running, like right now, they're preparing for a ski snowboard trip at one of the ski areas in Colorado. So then on Saturdays or Sundays or whatever day the trips were running, then the student leaders, that's who I was in charge of, would run those trips for their other students in the college and create those cool experiences while they're in college.
Man, I think I missed my calling. That sounds like a pretty sweet job.
Yes, it was amazing. We got to go all over the country and see cool things in Colorado, and we had a ropes course, and we did a bunch of adventures.
Very cool.
It was awesome.
So you ended up back here in Missouri near Table Rock Lake, beautiful area.
Yeah.
I'm partial to it myself. And You got to be an EMT, you work in the fire service now. Where did the canine stuff,
Hmm.
how did that kind of play in? Did you always have a dog and then you just kind of fell into it? Or did you get a dog with a specific intent of doing search and rescue? And then was there cadaver find or live find, or kind of where did you go with that?
So in 2009, my wife and I moved outside of Pueblo into a small mountain town, and they had a volunteer fire department and volunteer EMS. And somehow I got interested in it, and I said, "Well, I'm going to go learn how to be an EMT." And then on like Christmas break, we went on standby because some kids were missing, with their Christmas GPS present. And I got to see the county and local resources do search and rescue. I had done that with the outdoor leadership degree. Unfortunately, we had people get hurt every once in a while, or kids at camp or somebody be missing. So you kind of, where are they, and find them, but not at this level. And so then I became a part of the county team there. And one of the teammates, she had a canine. I had knew nothing. And then they got called out for a gentleman that was missing on one of the 14,000-foot peaks up in the high mountains, and they needed a navigator slash support person. I was pretty good with map and compass and carrying gear and could be a helpful person. So I basically followed this canine handler and her dog around an entire day in the field. I mean, not just a 20-minute search. We were out there for hours. And this dog would just go around, and all these dogs, there was about 5 or 6 dogs that were deployed on this mission. And then we all came back to the hood of the car, and the subject hadn't been located. And everybody compared their information, where the dog's nose was pointing, and then we triangulated an area.
Hmm.
And sure enough, later the person was found in that area, in a very tough terrain. But I was like, how do dogs do this? And then how do
Right.
all these people, and then the organization of all that, the team leader that got the map out and took everybody's compass bearings and dog. And I was like, I'm doing this. I knew nothing about it, but I was like, this is amazing. My
Yeah.
wife and I, we had a dog, an awesome black lab from the Denver Dumb Friends League that she found, but
Hmm.
I knew nothing about getting a dog until I was like, oh, I wanted to learn more.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it was amazing.
The connection between, they call him man's best friend for a reason. Dogs just have
Hmm.
this thing about them that you can't explain it. They're always looking at you, they're always kind of scanning
Yeah.
you for clues and whatnot. So being
Yeah.
able, that's the part that fascinates me the most, is being able to tap into the mind of an animal and work in synergy with them
Yeah.
to accomplish a goal out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, inclement weather, and to use their senses. I'm assuming their
Hmm.
sense of smell and hearing is the two that you key in on the most.
Yes.
But what types of training, you decided you're going to do this now?
Yeah.
What is the next step? Like, do you start with just simple? It's got to be something that builds on itself. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So looking back, I didn't necessarily know any of that getting into it, and I kind of joined a team. But I joined a team with a dog that I got from actually one of my college students. It was a black lab. His name's Tundra. He was my first search canine,
Hmm.
and I bought him for $100. And like a genetically bred dog for work is a lot more than that typically,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I have this awesome black lab and he's wonderful. Show me how to train him. So a lot of what we do in search and rescue for canine stuff is, there's not a lot of schools or paid courses you can go to. It's mostly in volunteer teams, people that help each other, and you can go to seminars and workshops and things, but really what you're doing is you're trying to figure out, is that dog driven for this work? Dogs are always smelling and checking out their world and things like that. And I've met dogs that are amazing. They can do awesome things with their nose, but finding the human in the woods after a long search or a short one are difficult. They might not totally be into it. They're kind of into finding the squirrel or
Hmm.
finding the food, or they're still using their nose, but I think one of the things that's been neat is watching the dogs that, man, they want nothing else than to do that work, and then whatever their reward system is. So you have to figure out, is it a toy? Is it a ball? Is it food? What is their reward system? Because that's what they're doing it for. They're doing that work because of the bond with you, and then they love the game. Your toy comes out, whether they just found a bomb or HRD or drugs or some cool invasive species that's being detected. And as soon as they find it, they're looking at their partner and they're like, when do I get the toy? And they just go through the roof.
I I look back to 9/11, and I remember that
Mhm.
there were some folks that didn't quite understand that these
Mhm.
dogs that were out there finding, unfortunately, a lot of them were deceased, and
Yes.
the handler would reward the dog for that find.
Right.
But
Right.
it's almost, if you're not aware of what's happening, it's obviously we're not celebrating, but the dog is performing a task and needs a reward for them to keep going. And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of thing. So you're really
Hmm.
tapping into those base, like food
Hmm.
and pleasure and happiness driven animals, and that's what you're just constantly reinforcing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's nice when, excuse me, it's nice when the dogs enjoy that reward system that doesn't take them away from the work. So if their reward, and it's not impossible, but if their reward is a tennis ball, and then odor they're trying to find, the live human or something else, is in a pile of tennis balls, they have to work through that.
Yeah.
So interesting that you said 9/11. The dog I have now, his breeder, we call her Grandma Ann. So her name's Ann Wickman, and she's out now in Oregon. But she responded from Colorado Task Force to 9/11.
Mm,
And so when she took her dog and a couple other, I mean, all those people that went out there, when they came, lots of people came back from that kind of experience and said, now we know this and we're adding to the wheelhouse. We're going to make things better. One of the things that she did is she started breeding dogs specific for this work. And in her breed, in her pack, if you will, like, there's been lots of dogs that bark alert and that, agility and the temperament. There are lots of agencies across the country that are trying to customize the breeding so that they get the dogs that are ready to go for that kind of work.
mm.
Um, it's just amazing to watch. And then, just to kind of think that, you know, his grandpa kind of thing, his bloodline was there. And then the legacy you can kind of keep going and have. And then you go to trainings and you meet other dogs from the same kind of breeding litter. And you can hear your dog and other dogs. You hear a bark, you're like, gosh, that sounds like Loki. And
Hmm.
it's his like cousin or brother or something. Um, so it's been, and there's just things that we do in the beginning. You were asking about how do we train that? I mean, in the very beginning, when they're a super cute little puppy, I mean, it's just about, you as the handler, you're sitting there with their favorite toy and you kind of run down the hall and do they come find you? And do they want to play with you? And do they, enjoy if you do it once or twice? Or what if you're hidden behind the rock and then they got to find you? Or then, they spin around a couple times and they're like, where'd he go? And then you see them switch from a visual to their nose working and they're sticking it up in the air or they're sticking it down on the ground to smell that scent on the ground. And you start seeing those things happen where the dog shows that it loves this game. And then you just keep making it fun and molding it.
So when you go and look at a litter, you could have 10 dogs of the same breed from the same mom, but there's always going to be that one or two that have more
Yeah.
drive, more determination than their litter mates.
Yeah. I am not a professional littermate assessor. That's like one, it's skill. And two, I think it's like instinct.
Yeah.
These people that do it, they can, they look at all kinds of traits. There's the scientific side of it, when you really kind of evaluate their genetics and looking at where they came and then there's people that they just have, you know, bred lots of dogs and they have done it really well and safely. And they're, they're just, they have that just like dogs have instinct or other humans can,
Hmm.
certain traits, that's something. And it's amazing how you watch a breeder do that. And they'll have a search dog that you can have search dog A and B. And so one for Scott, and then this one would be better for Amy, my wife. So just because of knowing the human dynamic, the dog partnered with that person, that's a whole other level. So they also pair them that way sometimes too.
I hadn't even thought about that part of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
people just have a knack for that, and to parlay that is, are there certain breeds that you typically find, like everybody thinks about a bloodhound as far as being able to track
Mm-hmm.
somebody, and you have
Yeah.
labs or German short-haired pointers that are retrieval type of a dog, so they're used to going after something. And then
Mm-hmm.
you've got the German shepherds, the Malinois that are, a lot of those can be bred to just be machines with no off switch.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that in search and rescue, you don't hear about too many search and rescue chihuahuas? I'm sure there needs to be
Right.
a
Right.
larger sized dog, but are there certain breeds that gravitate towards this that you find make up the bulk of these canine units, or is it kind of any dog that just has the knack, you can take it and run with it?
Yeah, you hit it on the head with all those breeds that you mentioned. Border Collies
Oh,
also have been really
sure.
successful in detection work and also live find human. And then Golden Retrievers. There's a whole line of Golden Retrievers
Oh,
that's like field trial, very high work ethic, like just tough as nails. And then, of course, there's just like a lab, there's the Golden Retriever that's like the best family, sit around the pool, hang out dog. And
hmm.
it's just super wonderful for that. So that's also, you're right. You don't see a lot of dogs that for work they're going to have to do in maybe difficult or terrain they might have to jump up or get through. A really big German Shepherd, let's say it's a 90, 100-pound German Shepherd, can do amazing things. And then if you find one that's 50 pounds, then it can get in different spots. And it's also like when they get injured, me carrying Loki, which is like, that's the current dog I have right now, he's about 50 pounds. If you needed to lift them up somewhere or haul them somewhere or carry them, or like my ski patrol friends, a lot of times they put them on their shoulders when they're skiing down the mountain to protect
Ah,
their dogs, to like limbs from running and the skis or the terrain's difficult. And police or military dogs, as far as like getting in and out of apparatus or helicopters, like you kind of have a sweet spot of the size of a dog. But yeah, lots of varieties there. I've seen, like you said, German Shorthair, pointers, and then in detection work, there's like Springer Spaniel, a lot of the TSA or bomb or kind of drug detection, just high work ethic, and they're checking suitcases or the wall or whatever they might be doing. So
hmm.
yeah, but size is important.
Yeah, I can see that. It probably helps too if you're in a situation, let's say there's a building collapse and you have all different kinds of needs as far as live find, cadaver find,
Hmm.
small
Hmm.
holes that you need an animal to get down into to explore a pathway versus a large dog that's just maybe on the surface or the perimeter. It would
Hmm.
help to have a team of smaller German short-haired pointers or labs, and then maybe a big German shepherd, or I don't know if blue heelers would be. Are they a little too feral
I
for this
haven't
kind of
seen a
work?
lot of those. I mean, I've
Okay.
seen them out with friends and other people training, working kind of also like farm and cattle and
Yeah.
ranch kind of situations, but I haven't come across one in one of the teams. Doesn't mean there isn't one. I've seen an amazing pit bull be HRD search dog. And again, it's like you find that dog that has that drive and connection, like you said, bloodhounds. I saw a bloodhound that liked to find people in the snow, like the avalanche dogs, and then get its toy. It was so cute with the big ears, Yeah. And then a Doberman. There's a guy out in Colorado that has a Doberman avalanche search dog and floppy-eared one. The ears aren't pinned,
Mhm.
so you just never know. It's a lot of it comes down to like that environmental stability. Also,
Mhm.
as far as hot, humid, where are you going to be deployed or what time of year. For
Yeah.
us here in this area around Table Rock right now, it's a totally different story than it is when it's humid at 90 and 100% and just
Yeah.
It makes it much more difficult.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The different types of training that you'll get
Hmm.
for a team. You have the cadaver find, you have the live find, and we're just talking about the search and rescue aspect. I know that there's the ATF side of things, the FBI side of
Hmm.
things, where the narcotics, the explosives, et
Right.
cetera. But for
Hmm.
search and rescue, you've got live find, cadaver find. Do you typically have dogs that will do both, or is that too much for the dog to kind of? Is it better to have them stay in one lane, or? And then
Yeah.
what other options are there, if any, besides those two categories?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, I've seen all three options. So in the live find, there's two skill sets. One is air scent, where their nose goes up in the air and the wind is coming at them, we'll just say in their face, and you see the
Okay.
dog pick its nose up. And then they do this zigzag, like almost like they're in a cone and they're going to the point of the cone, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and then there's trailing, like you think of those bloodhounds, and let's say the wind is at their back, and it doesn't have to be, but just for example, and then what they'll do is you just walked here, you went through the woods, and then they're either on lead or off. Usually they're on a lead, a long lead, and the dog is, you can see them, they have their nose down, and they're like, okay, I saw where he stepped, I can tell because I can smell it, and they follow that path to the live human. And then HRD cadaver, that so I've seen dogs that can do all three,
Hmm.
and you can see them with all behaviors. There's a school of thought out there that says either live or HRD. So find the live human or find the cadaver. Some agencies will only like deploy a single certified dog. Others will deploy a dog that can do either. I'll bark for the live, I'll lay down for the dead.
Okay.
And, they'll do that. So I'm not saying one is right or wrong. Definitely, it's important for somebody to make sure they know, and their dog will do those behaviors consistently, and they have their training records and they are reliable and all those things. What is really neat to see is the trailing dogs and the air scent dogs, or your live find dog, do both. So they're
Hmm.
moving through the woods and their nose is up, and then they're like, whoa, especially when you do training because you set up things, and then you see them put their nose down. You're like, that's where my subject walked. That's cool. And then all of a sudden the wind changes, or they get around a bend or a rock, they pick their nose up, and then they follow that scent to the human, and you're like, that's awesome. Because the dogs are smart and they want to find that person because then they can get their toy and it's the best
Yeah.
game ever. So it's really neat to see them do the both. But yeah, that you can have some dogs do all of them. I mean, and some people will go run with that, and other people are like, I'm just going to have mine be a HRD dog because that's my specialty, and I'll let somebody else do the live. And then the lines are very clear when the person, they say I have a find and it's HRD, or I have a find and it's live. They're buried underneath this rubble. Then you know which what you're looking for.
HRD, that's human remains detection, I
Yeah,
assume.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, cadaver or
No, that's
human
okay.
remains detection. Yeah. Hmm.
Do you find when you have dogs, is it one of those things where, yes, my dog can do both? Do most dogs do better when they specialize in either one aspect or the other? Or is it pretty easy for them to cross train and be good at both?
Well, that's a great question. I, if I was to pick, like, okay, what am I going to kind of stand on as far as like
Mhm.
my, at this point in my career, again, I'm not taking anything against people that do both. I
Right.
just think it's clearer in my opinion, for the field and for the dogs. And then also, I always try to think of who's calling us. Is it the fire chief? Is it the sheriff? Is it somebody from the county search and like who's calling us? And how do we tell them what we are and what they're asking for? If they know they have somebody that they're looking for that's deceased, then they want a dog and a team that's going to come out that's highly skilled in that.
Sure.
Like in California or when North Carolina, when or disasters, or like for us with a fire. I have friends that have HRD dogs in the Missouri search and rescue team, and there's a fire in a building, and once it's cool enough, they'll go in because sometimes it's hard for us to locate the human in that building that collapsed or whatever. We need
Right.
to know if they're still in there. Well,
Hmm.
their dog will come in because it's only an HRD dog, and they'll come in and they'll alert. And now you, as the team, knows exactly where to look. So I think it's super effective to just pick one or the other. And it is also really good for the live find dogs to be searching with human remains in their search area.
Yeah.
So my dog will, run around, he's doing it, and I'll see that, he notices different things out there, but he doesn't do his trained final response, his bark alert, when he's over the human remains or the cadaver. He'll only do that when he's over you in a trap spot or something. So,
To go down a bit of a rabbit hole, I just thought of a question. When you're doing training for human remains,
yeah,
what do you use for the scent that a
yeah.
dog will match up? Because you're obviously, not to be dark, but you're obviously not going to use an actual human. I wouldn't assume anyway. What?
Well, actually, you do.
Oh,
And
okay.
you 100% do, and you use all different things, and different states have different rules and agencies like laws and things like that.
Huh.
Yeah, so you'll, it's one of those things that you have to have chain of custody of those
Sure.
remains, and you have to have good documentation, and then of course like respect for those body parts,
Mhm.
or whether it's a piece of a human, some tissue. People will get that from different things. People will collect it from their own situations. Like, man, I lost my finger in the wood shop and I'm putting that in my freezer for training. That doesn't happen all the time, but like the whole, the idea of human
Oh my
remains handlers, they
goodness.
definitely have to, yeah, you have to have, that you're a separate freezer and containment, and then within, normal things at your training building or your facility. And yeah, so people will donate that. You can buy bones of from different places that can help with that process of training. And
Hmm.
then there's, just like you said, the ATF and that world, the science world has figured out certain containers that you can, store stuff in that helps or makes it better or easier to train with, a little bit more scientific. So a lot of times people just have things in like a mason jar with holes poked in the top, and then they'll put that source out, or like a suet container, they'll put something in there in a tree or underneath a rock. And so, yeah, you got to be super respectful and professional with it, and then
Yeah.
follow all your, the rules. And then, but yeah, you are. And then, of course, those folks too, they can't, like, you know, they have to make sure that they know where it is, and can't, have it get contaminated without documenting that, so that they can use that in their training records.
Mm.
And then you treat it different ways. So like the dogs that are really good at finding things in California after the fires have trained with human remains that have been charred,
Huh.
versus somebody who just passed away in their house, or drowned and the dog finds them in the water, or an avalanche victim. Those things are different kinds of scent pictures than the, and I'm not a certified HRD handler, so I only get to train as a support person for those people. That's a whole other specialty. So, but just working with them, I know that that's something that you have to, like, you want to make sure, if your dog's never found human remains in a fire, then that's a new thing for them if they are deployed to, a house fire or something like, the wildfires in California.
Well, yeah, I had no idea that you actually trained with real remains, and that, I mean, it makes total sense when you say
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it may sound a little bit rough, but that's one of the unfortunate realities of life, is in order to find other
Mm-hmm.
people, the
Yeah.
dead are helping us here living find other folks so they can have a proper burial, give the family closure,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Yeah, I've had people, we had a person in Colorado that had an accident, and they were alive, so they chose to donate their limb, to a search and rescue team. They were,
oh wow.
they felt like that was something that, Oh, okay, well, darn it, this is not exactly what I hoped it would happen as far as this accident, right? So what can I do? Just like we do on a driver's license, donate, sticker or whatever. But this
Oh
person
yeah.
was still alive.
Hmm.
And so they were able to do the right paperwork and get that to a search and rescue team in Colorado. And um, there's some states that it's actually legal officially like to do certain things. Other ones you just have to follow your kind of your area's paperwork as far as like kind of the medical things and just be
That's
be professional.
well, that's very
So
admirable for the whoever did that.
yeah, that was yeah
Yeah.
for sure.
When you start with search and rescue, let's just go with live find.
Mm-hmm.
You start, what age of a puppy do you typically start? Let's say that the person we were talking about earlier that's kind of evaluating them and seeing if they
Yeah.
have that natural instinct, that natural drive. When does someone like yourself who said, okay, you and I, buddy, we're going to be a team where you're going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn with you,
Mm-hmm.
because it certainly is not just the dog learning. You,
Mm-hmm.
when do you start doing that kind of stuff, and how long on average does the process take to where you have a dog that you can actually take in the field and utilize their skill set?
Sure. You know, when they're a puppy. I mean, they're in their litter, and the people are watching them do certain things. And the ones that are breeding them, they've got like these play areas set up and these toys, and so they're just really getting them like environmentally exposed to all these different sounds and things like that. So then you have this dog that you're like, okay, we'll do those quick little fun toy runaways. They're 10 yards in the grass in your yard around a bush.
Hmm.
And so you're kind of you're seeing that interest from the get-go. And what I like to do is really spend that early time not just making them the best searching dog, but making them feel really great and confident with their environment and the game of play,
Okay.
and then looking for that natural alert or that natural, final indication. Are they a barker? Are they, they'll naturally, when they find something, they look at you and sit. In certain agencies, you need a active alert, like a bark alert, or like Avalanche, we incorporate a dig, if they will, in, because we're trying to locate and dig that person out of the hole or the buried spot. But if you don't and you can have a passive, some people do a down, like the dog just naturally goes into a down, or they'll do this kind of like grab a toy and bring it back to you, or they'll tug on a thing on your harness or your backpack that says, "Hey, I found somebody," and they come back to you and they tug on that. So it just depends on what some of those natural tendencies are, because you want to support that and build that, because that's what, when the dog's hot and tired and that tongue's sticking out, or they've been working all day, and you ask them to carry a toy around when they're hot and tired and they're like, I'm trying to breathe here. I'm sweaty, I'm hot, I don't really want to
Right.
hold that toy. So you want something that is, persistent. And so we start really young, and you just watch that development phase when they're hitting anything, maybe a fear or they're uncomfortable, but you're just really trying to make sure that when they locate a human or they're engaged with a human and they find them and that that they think that's like the best thing ever, right? And so you're just really making that super successful.
Hmm.
And then you just tweak it as you go. You make things a little bit more challenging or difficult, and then you change a variable, and then you come back to something after that that's super fun, and then you make something a little harder. It's kind of like sports or anything in life. You just kind of like you move up, you move back, and you kind of, move forward on that continuum. There are training checklists out there and guides and things like that of what you want to see before other things. A lot of it really comes down to, are they enjoying the game? Are they comfortable in their environment? Are they willing to work? And can they turn it on when you need them to turn it off? And can they turn it on when you want them to? And can they turn it off when you want them to as well? Because if it's time to go sit in your crate or be in your space and not search, or sit next to me while we get a briefing or ride on an ATV from here to the trailhead, I need you to work when we get out there, not lose your mind at the car kind of thing. So some discipline there, some self-control is good. The ones that are super high drive and they just love it so much, it's hard sometimes to get them to be in that, okay, chill mode, because they know it's coming. They can tell, I get to go
Yeah.
find and play. This is awesome.
It's like they're going
So
to the park in the car and they're just working up, and by the
yeah,
time they get there, they're about to explode.
yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
When you are about to go out, I know that there's some environmental factors, the heat, extreme cold, that can shorten the
Hmm.
duration that a canine can be out there. But is
Yeah.
there a general rule of thumb as far as, okay, we're going to search for someone who got lost in the woods? We're going to
Hmm.
do 4 hour blocks or 3 hour blocks, and then we come back and rest and reset? Or do you just kind of go out for the day, so to speak? How does the time management part
Yeah.
work on that?
Well, that's really an important thing to be thinking about in your training plans too, because you want to emulate that or simulate that, because it's if you only train 30-minute training blocks and then all of a sudden you're deployed for 2 hours, your dog would be having a hard time.
Yeah.
So one of the factors comes into your search area and where you might have chosen to work or kind of communicate to command. I think we could work this zone, or command might be telling you, okay, you're this dog team, you're with this search party, and you guys are going into this area. And so if that one I told you about kind of got me hooked, I mean, we had a whole mountain.
Yeah.
Our area was huge, so we were gone all day, and we took breaks while we were out there. When I had some deployments with Tundra in Colorado, it was sometimes like that, multiple hours or an all day thing, or night searches where you'd be out for several hours. And that's because the search area was larger. So you needed to kind of be out there longer and also just take breaks while you're out there. Here, we kind of have, smaller search areas in the initial work, because, depending on where you're looking in, somebody's couple acre or whatever farm, or, the Mark Twain National Forest around us, which, it gets divided up into different compartments, and we look at it in like search segments. So that's probably how I would look at it is you want the ability to be able to have a full day of searching with breaks and transitions. They never are working that entire time. You're not running them the entire time.
Right.
They might be thinking about it the entire time, but you're not out there just running the hills. But if it is something where the command needs kind of a hasty search, or they need a team to do more of a fine search in a certain area or around a pond, you might adjust your strategy just to be able to kind of. It all comes back to, we're just one team in the whole search mission that's trying to
Hmm.
get information. That person might not even be in our area. We're just trying to. The best thing we can do is go back to command and say they're not in there. we
Okay.
can we can say, with high probability, that you can focus on other areas
So you've got
versus.
a process of elimination as you
Hmm.
go through a grid. You can say, okay, we've checked this whole sector or whatever, however they break it down. They're
Right,
not here. We can
right.
mark that off. Now we have seven
Yes.
more over here that we got to look at, and it's just you keep working that way.
Yeah, yeah. And if it's one of, it's around here in August where the terrain is so dense,
Hmm.
that would be a much lower number, even if my dog ran through it, than if it was right now, because of the woods are open. You
Yes.
can see through them.
Hmm.
So, not that I'm looking like that, but the dog, as far as how they're moving through that with less vegetation, is they can cover more area, they can check more things. If it's super dense or a real deep canyon or really challenging, you kind of have to take that area and even make it smaller, and then bring your dog back through that a couple times or grid it. But a lot of times you can, once you've, had an opportunity in training to set up okay, we're going to practice you clearing this left side. So just let us know when your dog has done that, and you practice doing that with what they call blind searches. So I don't really know where the subject is. I'm just reading my dog,
Hmm.
and you're not going to fail. Like, they're not going to make you train your dog bad, or you'll learn from it. But if you've never done that in training, it's really scary to do that in real world because you're thinking, oh gosh, if I get this wrong, somebody's life is at risk, So
Yeah.
you want to train like that. So then you've got, you're watching me and you're like, yes, you're right. Or nope, read your dog a little different, or let's look at the wind, and let's, try that again kind of thing and see if you can figure it out. So that's really helpful to do too.
You were talking a minute ago about managing your dog's timeline as far as if it's really hot and they're panting and, it's like, I
Hmm.
kind of need to dial it back. That also applies to the handler. You have to be
Yeah.
someone that can go, we're going to walk 5, 6, 7 miles today,
Yeah.
and it's going to be in rough terrain. Or if you're in Colorado where you're at elevation and it's not
Yeah.
near as flat out there as it is here as a general
Right.
rule, that
Right.
that can be pretty rough on the handler as well. So you need to really be able to
Hmm.
walk for a long period of time.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have, a minimum requirement, and then you have all the extras. You got the canine stuff. They don't carry like a pack like a hiking dog does for
Mhm.
backpacking if people do that. But that job I had with that first search, I was the one carrying all that extra water,
Hmm.
because the dog, if you don't have it out there and you can't drink from streams or lakes and cool off, dogs, humans need the water, and you got to carry that stuff for each team and all the rescue gear and first aid and all that stuff. And then um, while you're hiking around as a handler, you're watching your dog, you're trying to look at your map, you're trying to think about weather, you're thinking about the wind, you're sometimes having to talk on the radio while you're watching your dog,
Mhm.
just thinking of other hazards that are out there. Sometimes you're training or searching in a area that's really treacherous, or maybe even like historical trapping area with like, traps or other kinds of like, mines, or
Mhm.
sometimes you'll come across things in the woods that are not legal. So,
Yeah.
you don't want your dog getting into certain things that are out there that, hazardous that way, or even certain water sources that have, algae or things that could hurt you or the dog, stuff like that.
Yeah. When you are going out into the field with your dog, is your dog on a lead, like a 20, 30 foot lead? Or does
Mm.
the dog, is part of the training that the dog kind of maintains either a
Hmm.
line of sight or a certain distance from you before they'll come back and check in with you? And are they coming and going
Hmm.
kind of a thing as you work your way towards whatever they're
Hmm.
smelling?
Yeah. Yeah. So if they're trailing, typically those handlers have their dog on a lead. So they're watching their nose work in case they get off the trail. They kind of post up like you would, like leading a horse in a pen, and
Okay.
then they help them kind of circle back, and then you see them catch that trail, and then off they pull a little harder. So typically trailing dogs are on lead most of the time.
Okay.
I always have a lead. Sometimes it's short or long, and I'll do that with my dogs. We had a search where we needed to kind of hike in several miles before we were in our search area, and that's a lot of woods. And some dogs, they're just because of their training with their handler, that's what they've really done well with their dog, or the dog breed, like we were talking about before, they just stay close. And other
Okay.
dogs are ranging dogs where they'll, like a field trial dog, where they go out and then they loop back to you,
Okay.
because they're kind of working the field. And my dog's a little bit more of a field trial, a ranging dog. So in order to conserve his working time, sometimes I'll keep him on lead with his harness and we'll hike in. And then boom, he gets off lead, and now he's supposed to go search off lead as a live find dog. And he wears a GPS collar when we do wilderness. And then I can see where he's at, kind of get some information based off of his what he's doing when he's like in the woods and I can't see him. Or, I can also take that map information later and use that for, feedback, in the sense of like, you know, kind of like debrief, but I can also give it to command and say, this is where we searched. And then they can put that into their mapping system to be able to, kind of look at information of where they want to have the next operational period work, or the next dog, or whatever might the case be.
Something that you just mentioned there, the GPS collar, I would
Hmm.
imagine that technology has made your life as far as search and rescue a little bit easier from as far as tracking where you've been, where you're going. You can kind of see a
Mm-hmm.
bird's eye view where you're at, where your dog is at. And I know that you can use drones in certain areas, but around here, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
summertime, a drone would be almost worthless because you're not going to be able to see underneath all the treetops to actually what's
Yes.
going on the ground. So,
Right.
it's a tool in the toolbox, of course, but besides the GPS stuff, would you say that's the main technological advance that you've seen? Because working with a dog, I don't see technology really affecting the training and stuff much. That
Mm-hmm.
seems to be a man and beast, for lack of a better term, connection that
Yeah.
technology just doesn't get involved in.
Yeah. Totally true. We're we're just relying on their amazing abilities to take 10 acres and you can stand in one spot and the dog can search that entire 10 acres in minutes and find the person or come back to you and say, okay, let's go to the next area. Versus you out there walking all of that.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We use the only other technology piece that we use is for the human stuff where we like that said GPS dog collars, but there's a program called CalTopo. It's a mapping software program.
Okay.
And this this has been a game changer for search and rescue because so our fire department uses it in a lot of places across the country and it's all tied into our they can have the app on their phone and then they can record their location, their track. One of the things that's totally changed the work time for us as search is, let's say you're lost in the woods and you call 911. The 911 triangulation is actually getting so much better here that it's way more accurate than it was. So that's been a tool. But then the other one is we can send you, as long as you have service on your phone, we can send you a text and you'll click this link. It's like spam, where it immediately geolocates you and then puts your location on our map.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's a locating deal, and we've used it here at Central Crossing and with other agencies in this area. And then for sure, when I was in Colorado and other places in the country, they use it a lot. But it has turned, since I've been here in the last 2 years, we've had about 6 or 7 official searches in this area where we've deployed our team to actually do it versus just sending somebody to the trailhead. And the ones that we've used this on, if we did have service with them, you took, a 300-400 acre Mark Twain National Forest and you isolated a certain area, and it's been a game changer for the person who's lost. It significantly decreases their time. So some people are like, man, this is making this so much faster. That's awesome. And it sure is. But nothing's foolproof, right? Like we can send
Yes.
something, and if they can't access that, then what are you going to do? Well, you have to use all those other
Hmm.
core, search and rescue. Can you read a map? Can you go out there and hike? Can you cover areas? Can you know, search as a human and a dog or whatever resources? Because you don't want to just rely on technology.
Yeah, there's so many, the Garmin InReach is one that pops into my head as far as your ability to send an SOS or text message
Hmm.
about I'm injured, I'm stuck. And technology is really beneficial, but I think a lot of the folks that I would assume a lot of the folks that you find needing to be rescued are folks that weren't planning maybe to go out for a
Yeah.
2 or 3 day backpacking trip. They made a wrong turn somewhere and were enjoying the nature. Next thing you know, the sun's going down and they don't know where they're at.
Yes. And that, of course, their service is dead. And the last time they were pinged when they call 911 is not where they're at when you find them. Even if you're on the phone with them telling them to stay put, people get antsy. I would. And,
Yeah.
you start moving around. So it, you know, going back to your terrain and really analyzing that. And that's actually how we had a search. My very first like couple months I was here in Missouri, our fire chief was in, running the command, and a lot of these people here have been in these woods doing all kinds of things for years. So they're organized very well. And then there was this one other area, and he was looking at the map and I was looking at him and we were talking, and you just start analyzing it, and he's like, I need to, my next priority is to go into this area. And sure enough, that's where we found the person.
Hmm.
It's based off of a lot of that historical info, what kind of details are coming back from your teammates. And that was the cool thing, combining what we're talking about. That was, I was only here a couple months, and then, he looked, when you talked about physical, we didn't have another ATV or vehicle to insert us. And so my fire chief looked at us and he's like, well, I don't have a way to get you in. Can you hike in? And because of what you said, what we did in Colorado and other places, like, we have our backpack and our dog is ready to hike in and then deploy. And we ended up doing that, me and another responder. So it was, us three, my dog and him and I, and we head down the trail. And we used a scent article. So the other part of the live find is you can do no scent article or you can do a scent article. It's scent specific. So we used the subject's hairbrush. So
Okay.
Tundra smells the hairbrush at the trailhead. It wasn't our search area, but I went ahead and scented him because I wanted to see what he would do when we started walking down the trail. So we start heading down this trail, and then we get to this creek. And I wasn't officially, in my mind, like, okay, I'm really watching my dog. I'm paying attention. I was looking at the terrain, looking at the map. I'm, talking on the radio, and then I see Tundra, like a 90-degree turn, boom, right up this creek. And I go, Dennis, did you see that? And he goes, yeah, because he was a hunting bird dog guy. And he
Okay.
goes, yeah. And so he had dog experience, which is really great. So I was like, we might come back to this creek. And we walk another 100 yards to our insert spot. And I'm like, okay, let's go to work. Um, he didn't really, my dog didn't really want to go up that trail very much. So he's like, Dad, we don't need to go up here. So we walk up the trail. I take him up that trail a little bit, and he's pulling me back to the left, which is towards the creek. And I'm like, Dennis, we're going back to the creek. And so we go back to the creek, and he takes off up the creek. And so we start following Tundra back in this creek, and he's left us in the dust. And it's thick. It's whatever it is, November, August. It was the woods were not open. So
Right.
he's meandering through there, and then we start yelling out, and then we hear the subject, and and we say, yeah, my dog's coming. And so my dog was like right at him, and he comes into him, and he's like licking him and doing his thing, and brought us right into him. And so we found the guy and then hiked him out to everybody else. And so we get out, and that was just one of those moments where it's like you're looking at a search area, you're doing all that analysis, and then you have all those pieces ready to go, your gear, your dog, and it's kind of just a wonderful experience with the whole team. And then the family that comes out, and then this guy who had medical challenges, we had to help him with that. And one of the neat things is once you do that, you watch your dog or what they do later, right? So he just walked out with us, and off we go. And then we get back to the trailhead, and he's saying hi to the subject, but he's actually paying attention more to the family, who's a little bit absorbing this big moment. And he's just kind
Mhm.
of like leaning on him and touching him, and then the dog's happy and he gets petted. And just seeing that dynamic play out with the subject's family
Yeah.
and the whole team. The only reason we were in that area was because all the other team had been searching like 5 other sections.
Hmm.
And then the chief was just like, okay, let's go over here, you're ready to go. And then we go in there, and it just all came together. So it's just a good unified response.
That's got to be nice to see the outcome of your work and it's a happy ending and everybody wins in that regard.
Yeah, it was super special, and especially because we're new to this area and trying to learn who the people are here. and
Yeah.
and for this region to kind of absorb, or to kind of take this kind of work so seriously, just like they would for fighting a fire or doing an EMT call, medical call. It's just another one of the deployments that your community needs. And like you said, there's all kinds of resources out there. It's a matter of just using the ones you have to the best of their ability. if you put your dog, like if they would have put us in an area that was unsafe or dangerous or not in our search area, then you come back either hurt or you don't find anything. And it was a good walk, but like, did you use that resource to, like flying a drone through dense woods, that you're probably going to hurt your drone.
Yeah.
So that's not a good use of that. So yeah.
When a dog finds a person, a live
Hmm.
find, is there training that you do with, if you have somebody that is, when you're training, someone hides in the woods and then you do the scent and then they're going to go find them and they find them. Are they trained to then go up and lick them or wag their tail, or do they just start barking, or do they
Hmm.
sit, or what's the
Yeah.
end like?
Well, with Tundra, he's a super affectionate dog. So his trained final response, and he did this, is he ran to the person, ran back to me, grabbed the toy, and if he's really excited, he would have barked just cause. But he grabs the toy from me, like it's sitting on my pack on my waist belt, and he grabs it, and then he goes back. And in training, you're doing this thing, and then you say, "Show me," and he takes you back to the subject. It's called a refind.
Okay.
And with Loki, what he does is he gets there, and we were training the other day, and he did the alert, and my firefighter teammate was like, "Wow, that was loud," because he barks like he's like, "Roar, roar," he just goes nuts
Yeah.
because he's like, "Give me the toy," kind of like what you see on disaster dogs.
Okay.
So other dogs, they'll go and they'll sit at the subject and they'll bark, or I mean, they'll just sit there and not bark. But Tundra was much more of a like, I'm gonna lick you kind of thing, and the toy, because you pet me and tell me I'm the best dog ever. That was his style. So you kind of need to find the one that works, that motivates that dog,
Okay.
and use that to their benefit, because that's what they're going to default to.
Right.
Other ones, they'll do other things like you're saying, where they'll grab a toy, or they'll sit or down or bark. And really, the contact with the person isn't necessarily a trained final response. The licking, like that's not his do this when you find them. That's kind of just some dogs' tendency to be a little over affectionate. Some subjects in training don't want your dog all on them, so. And if it's a subject that is maybe hurt or injured but
Right.
alive or scared, you kind of don't want your dog also to do that. And then potentially, if the person's startled or dangerous, you don't
Yeah.
necessarily want the dog to get hurt because they're doing something that makes the person think that they're going to hurt them. So they
Yeah.
would defend themselves or something. So
Okay.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
What's I don't remember if I asked this question, but the process for when you start with a puppy and you realize they may have what it takes,
Yeah.
you start pretty early. How long does it typically take to
Yeah.
get a dog that is ready to go in the field?
Yeah. That's a great question. I forgot to answer that earlier. So if you have, so if a dog is like, they're the right dog, right? And you have the system, the support system for training, those dogs can be certified and deployable within less than 2 years.
Okay.
Totally. It's the situation where you're a volunteer and you get to train a little bit on things, and maybe once a week at most. And maybe your dog is kind of mostly ready, but maybe it's also just needs a lot of support. Then it can take you longer, or it might not happen. And you get down the way and they just decide they don't want to do it.
Hmm.
But when I feel like I'm in effective training mode, you're training and doing things multiple times a week. And those dogs that are at places that get trained. So there's an organization out in California that trains dogs that I got to go to, that does rescues, and it trains dogs for disaster search work. Those dogs are being trained 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and they are
Man.
the elite of the elite, right?
Yeah.
So those dogs are ready in a short amount of time, but they're also selected. So they rescue dogs, and then if there's 10, I don't know, 10 dogs that come in, however many they pick, all the ones that didn't make the cut, they're still finding their job for them. Maybe they become a wilderness dog or an avid dog, but not a disaster dog, or they become like a sport dog. So really, for me, it also, the other thing that can get in the way of being certified is injuries.
Oh,
You're
sure.
you're moving right along. It's year two and you have an injury with your dog, and you're like, well, we got to rehab that, and fix that up, and then your training gets back on. So having good fitness and nutrition and doing the things we would do as a human, but we do that with our dogs, so we're ready for the
Hmm.
work. That also affects your time frame too.
One of the things you were just talking about there, the disaster dog versus the wilderness dog. How
Hmm.
many? I can see somebody, like in California right now, they've got the fires going on out there. It's a mess. And
Yes.
I'm sure they have dogs out there that are more like rural versus urban type dogs,
Hmm.
wilderness dogs versus structural search and rescue type dogs. Do
Yeah.
you find dogs are kind of cross trained? It's live find in any environment, or it's cadaver find in any environment, or do you then split them up into this dog is made for the Rocky Mountains, the middle of
Hmm.
nowhere, wilderness, and
Yeah.
this dog excels in structural collapse?
Yes, you definitely do. You see them
Okay.
divide up. It's kind of like the elite athlete. You're sure there are dogs that can do anything, any environment,
Yeah.
but that is very, less of a
Rare.
less than likely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the ones that love being on rubble, that's great. But there's some that are just amazing search dogs that will be on everything except major rubble piles and things like that, and they do great. Where we were in southern Colorado, it was desert. So
Yeah.
being like cactus aware, versus
Hmm.
running around the grass fields of, some other area. So just using your training platform to help teach those dogs those skills and expose them to that environment builds that confidence. Then they start knowing how to move through that terrain really effectively when they're younger, so they can, because like in Colorado, a big boulder field above tree line that's a huge disaster
Yeah.
field, right? So you can't avoid rocks because you're a wilderness dog, or snow or ice or creeks or rivers, but you do want to make sure that the dogs that are deploying in that some of those really super super unique challenging environments, like the floods in North Carolina,
Yeah.
like a major mudslides, so like that's, if your dog and your handler are not fit and ready and really composed, they're likely to get hurt and not be able
Yeah.
to do that job they need to do. It's really tough hearing those people tell the stories about what that deployment was like. There's not much that's, harder than what they did.
Speaking of deployments, I know that on my podcast here, we typically talk about careers and folks that are firefighters, accountants, doctors, et cetera, where they're earning a living. And I
Hmm.
know that you had experience as an educator and now you work in the fire service. So
Hmm.
I'm going to assume that that's what pays your bills, and the
Yes.
canine side of things uh, are the vast majority of folks that are doing canine work, unless they're employed by the ATF or they have a
Right.
bomb dog and that's their job. These are volunteers of folks that are doing this because they want to help, they find it interesting, and it's something that they want to do.
That that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Very fortunate to be at a fire department that supports the work, and there are firefighters that's probably the main place that you can see search and rescue work, whether it's wilderness, urban, disaster, fire, whatever it is. That's probably the one place, other than the other examples you said, that you could see somebody have a job to do this.
Hmm.
And the nice thing about my paid job is that you get a ton of medical, you get a ton of command and logistics and technical training, and just understanding how those deployment, missions and things work, so that you know how to be ready to go. The volunteer search and rescue teams, they have a huge variety of those depending on what state you have. And
Yeah.
Missouri's got a lot of cool ones, and Arkansas, I've just been learning about the ones in our area, and there's lots of great resources out here. I know Colorado gets a big, or California, or whatever state that's kind of like the mountain scene gets the kind of attention. But this area is pretty interesting with some of those resources and being able to kind of pull together for searches or rescues and things like that. But yeah, my paid job is, I never thought this would be my career, being in education and working with students in the outdoors and teaching and doing all that the whole time. But the only reason I got here is because I would be coming back to my paid job, which is a teacher, and telling my students about like these search missions we'd go on. And then, so we started, doing different things. And at the university, we started the search and rescue team at the university. So then we got to do that through the college. And, it's just one little volunteer, one opportunity at a time has kind of turned into me having this. And then when I got here, that's when I started my own business training dogs, because I would saw that there wasn't really a place that people were doing that. And I just wanted to see if I could do it more. So now I get to work when I'm not at the fire department, I get to work with people in their kind of home, their pet companion, but these are dogs that are like working lines and training them, and then, work with like teaching seminars and just doing different kind of training sessions, whether it's in person or online, trying to see if there's a way to get more people that support that maybe they're getting from their volunteer team, but maybe just want some coaching kind of thing.
There is a lot that goes into it. You have folks that are dedicating their time to train
Hmm.
their dog on how to do this, and they spend time out. You've got, I'm sure you go through dog treats like nobody's business, and tennis balls and leash,
Yeah,
and there's travel involved, and
yeah,
things of that nature. So where
yeah.
do you typically go? I don't recall the location. I want to say it's in Kansas. Isn't there a like a set up disaster city, for lack of a better term, that
Oh
you
yeah,
can go
that's a
train?
great place. It's called Crisis City
That's it. That's it.
in Salina. Salina. I'm gonna
Right, Salina, I
say that
think.
wrong. I
That's
think
fine.
people say Salina out here. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a wonderful place. We've been able to go there with a few different trainings, and that's that for whatever team you're a part of, whether it's rescue, fire, the military. I mean, that's awesome.
If we have Missouri Task Force One, some of the guys that I work with on the fire department are members of Missouri Task Force One, and they've talked about some of the different FEMA deployments when it seems like a lot of their stuff is geared towards the Southeast where we'll have tornadoes in Florida and things of that nature. Do you ever get deployed to things like that, or do you have to be on a specific team like Mo Task Force
Hmm.
One to go to those
Yeah,
things? Okay.
yeah, you do. When you're so in Colorado, with what we would get deployed on until the state or FEMA came in, was that initial 0 to 3 day kind of time frame.
Yeah.
So let's say the tornado happened here in Shell Knob. We would be in on that in the beginning, but then when those federal resources came in, you'd have to meet the qualifications, which is uh, it's basically a disaster certified type 1 or 2 certification to be able to be on roster for that, which is important, and totally get it and support it. My friends that are on some of those teams, the training level that those dogs are at, the readiness is super, super high. So yeah, you have to be at that level or be in that loop to do that. There is a state K9 thing here in Missouri that I'm interested in learning more about, but there are other resources, so we're in region D. So if something happens here in kind of the SEMA or the local kind of IST kind of situation would be, or, managing something, then those people can call in different resources from departments. But the example you brought up is, and that's pretty important. You don't want people coming in that aren't ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is, if you could go back and do your training with your dogs over again?
Hmm.
You've trained other folks. What are the things that you see that people routinely either get wrong or just misunderstand about training a dog for search and rescue type work?
Yeah. If I could have, right? I think one of the things is spending time in whichever curriculum you can get. There's a bunch out there, but just making sure that you understand the dog breed that you're interested in. The dog, whether you call it cognition or behavior, like what is the dog doing when they're doing these things? So when I came out here and was like, oh, I'm going to learn more, I didn't do more search and rescue training. I did more canine education on how to reward and support and communicate. What is your dog doing when they look up at you with those big wide eyes, or when they yawn, or what's their body position? So really understanding dog behavior and
Mm.
just the kind of the dog trainer side. That's one, spending time in that world. And then fitness and nutrition, injury prevention, and just making sure your dog has good canine fitness, because what we're asking them to do is, go from sitting at the house in their crate or kennel or backyard to being in the car and then hitting the deployment. And it's like, whoo, like, are they ready right now? If we got a call, is Loki ready? Am I ready for that deployment? And so that's really important. There's other things out there as far as some of those canine resources, and like, how do you develop a training plan and how do you document that? Hopefully the team people are a part of have that, but there's resources out for, like, how do you organize your training, because nobody's going to organize it for you unless you like pay for somebody to do that as a coach or trainer. Most people are they're volunteers, so they're like, okay, my team wants, we're working on this, how am I going to develop the plan in this next week? So just having some experience or some ideas or support system to do that is important.
What what types of if someone comes to you and says, "I wanna do this.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my dog, I've got my leash,
Mm-hmm.
I've got my bag of treats, I've got a tennis ball.
Yes.
I'm ready to
Yeah.
go." What you know, I talk to a lot of the folks that I interview about the soft skills that allow someone to be successful in whatever career they're looking for. But when someone wants to be a search and rescue canine expert or specialist,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got to assume that patience is going to be near or at the top of that list. But what other soft skills do you see
Yeah.
people go, that guy's really successful, and here's why?
Yeah. We talk a lot about the dogs having the drive and wanting to do the work.
Yeah.
They need to. They
Yeah.
need to, when they're sitting around flipping through whatever, reading a book or looking online or go and have a chance to go to a training, do they spend the money and time to do it? Are they willing to, you know, watch videos and ask questions and go to seminars and conferences and travel and essentially work so that you have the money and time to invest in that? So the dog has the drive for the toy, but does the human have the drive to make themselves better? Because
Mhm.
they're also having to do both, right? They have to make themselves better as a handler,
Oh, yeah.
but they have to be ready to work hard for their dog.
Right.
Your dog is looking to you to say, well, what are we doing next, Dad? And
Yeah.
you're, I don't know, I hadn't thought of anything. And
Right.
so, well, cool. And then the dog will just make up something fun and play with you.
Mhm.
But I think that's an important thing. And the other thing that comes to mind is you have to be open to learning and feedback. You're putting everything out there to learn this and to invest your time. And
Mhm.
in order to grow and to be somebody that's able to be called on a mission, and do a good job, you have to be somebody that's got that, I'm ready to learn, I don't know everything, and I've got integrity. And people, they see that because, the moment you get a chance to show up for a mission, or even before that, the moment you get approved to be on a team, because a lot of teams have, there's an application. Once you've done that, now you need to continue to be a good example for that organization. You show up at a deployment and do something that's not appropriate or whatever, then your team doesn't look very good and you're not going to get called back. So it's important to really have that. Like you said about what if you thought your dog could deploy to California and help, but you're
Hmm.
not certified, you're not qualified, you just really want to do it. Well, that's good that you really want to do it. Now go get the training and get qualified so
Yeah.
that when it's time you can go, but don't go outside your boundaries. Um, and I think probably the other thing that makes me, you have to have that love for it. So when you've asked me questions about the dogs and what they do, like times I get goosebumps or I get excited, or I'm training with my dog and it's a hard day. You got to bounce back from it because you know that you're okay. Well, that was tough learning. Okay, now what are we going to do this next thing? And just kind of roll with it sometimes. It's a powerful thing to be a part of. You learn a lot and you definitely grow with your dog. And as a trainer, when I'm working with other people, I love working with my dog, but if I can work with you and the other four dogs in the group, like I'll go to seminars or workshops and some people are like, I want to work my dog, and I get that. And I also want to work with the four dogs that are there, because what can I learn from all those dogs and those handlers? And then when I go back home, I can take that information into my training plan, because I won't have that opportunity to work with that group next week, right? I only have
Yeah.
that today. So then you go to these things to learn that, and then incorporate that with your own plan.
What I'm hearing, you got to check your ego and you got to turn
Yeah.
into a sponge. And you're just
Yes.
soaking up all the information that you can because that's just
Yes.
going to make you better.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
excellent synopsis. That's good.
One of the questions that I always ask, and I don't think I need to ask this, is what do you like most about your job? But we've been talking for well over an hour. I just realized I've enjoyed every minute of it. You
Me
are
too.
obviously really passionate about this. I don't think I need to ask you what you like because you seem to like it all.
Yeah.
But is there every job, it's got good days, bad days, pros and cons. Is there something that you kind of wish you could change about your job? Or is there something that what's the irritant in your job?
Mm.
Or is there one?
Well, I think one of the things we're working to try to change is we've got some work to do to make sure the agencies that might need those specific resources in the canine field know what's out there and where to get it.
Okay.
So you might hear about a search where the, kid or person went missing, and then they didn't call for whatever resources they needed for search. So I think it'd be great to continue to build that knowledge base in the industry so that you could use this resource because it's most appropriate, or these three things combined because that makes a good deployment or something. I think we've got some room to grow there. And all the other things that we talked about as far as the work we do,
Yeah.
um, it's not really that fun when you lose dogs or they get hurt. I mean, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Sure.
You put so much into this, and when you hear of people that have had challenging things, or a tragedy, that's heartbreaking, whether whatever dog it is, you because it's your partner. I mean, like, you spend, you know if you have kids and a job and a partner and all that, you sometimes spend more time with your dog than all the other people in your life, and you're going, wait, but so it's you're really connected, and you have to
Yeah.
balance that so that you know what you're doing. But it's a powerful thing to see. And when they look up at you and they do what you're doing, and if you make a mistake, you kind of, you're like, sorry buddy, that was my fault, I messed up on that, and you feel like they understand, but you don't know if they do. They
It's kind of
forgive
like
you.
when you accidentally step on their toe and you hear them let out that yelp and you're just like, golly, I feel awful right now. I didn't mean to
Oh
do that.
yes.
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
But they don't
Yes.
understand English, so just give them a treat.
That's right. That's right. Just love on them, and
Yeah.
they recover much faster than you do
Yeah.
in your heart. But and all the dogs, whether it's somebody's pet home dog versus a working dog, that bond is so strong with all the different kinds of dogs that are out there. And
Yeah.
just seeing those specific, those dogs rise to the occasion of being able to do that work to help find other people. They don't know the gravity of what they're doing, right? But they just love the work, and they love that process and the game and the connection with you to go out there and train and play, and they'll do it all day.
It is funny how they think they're playing and you want to tell them you just saved somebody's life. This isn't a game.
Right.
This isn't a
I
game,
know.
man, but that's
Yeah.
whatever. Whatever floats your
Yeah.
boat, I suppose. So,
I know. Like, why am I crying? And that my dog's looking at me like, come on, Dad, let's play.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true.
What you had mentioned a little bit ago about you wish that some of the agencies maybe utilized their resources more or better. I probably didn't word it as good as I should have, but what is the state? Is there a state entity? I know we have Missouri Task Force One, they go nationally, but is there a state organization that deals with canine resources, or if you went to the state level, who's your contact? What department is your contact? Or is there one?
That yeah, I don't have. I'm learning how to figure that out here. So what I've learned is like within like how we're organized in the regions,
Yeah.
and so like I've met a couple of people. I met a gentleman in I think Region C or something. So they're in those regions. They have different people in charge of different things, and so the canine or technical rescue or other things within those regions, they organize it that way. And then, if there was a state, if there was an event in Region D, then those people would look at their kind of, we used to call them in Colorado like a battle book, which would be like all the resources in Region D that you could call for your kind
Uh,
of ready to go mutual aid partners,
okay. Yeah.
or people kind of rostered to do certain skills. Just like an IST team would be looking for a planning section chief versus something else. So that's what I understand now. And then those resources within SEMA and things like that are coordinated in the event they need it in the state level. Um, Locally, I think that's kind of seems to me, I mean, and this is the way it was in Colorado and other places too. It's just like relationship building, chief to chief, sheriff to sheriff,
Right.
making sure state patrol, if they are the first one that gets the call about the lost person, how do they interface with the fire department in county or sheriff's office in that area? And, it's not like you can just query a list and say, I need 4 ATV, professionals and 3 drones and 10 dog teams. And then boom, they come out of the woods. Like
Yeah.
some states organize that, California has something, and some of the other ones are looking at like ways to, but I think it also depends on the number of calls that a state would get in that category. It's
Yeah.
just not enough to say we need to have some tool that deploys, that organizes all those people.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
that's
that
what
makes
I
sense.
know now. I have a lot to learn still in that area.
Well, I'm sure there's somebody, hopefully somebody in Jeff City is listening to this and then they'll get their act together, but it's the government. So who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
If
Sounds
you,
good.
so if you could go back and start
Hmm.
over, would you take any different career choices or different career paths? Or was there something that was always on the back burner that you thought, if I didn't get into education and then get into the fire service and do search and rescue stuff, I would want to do this?
Mm. Well, my time in Colorado, I was a little older when I was doing it, but I still loved it and tried, as a way to stay fit. But like, I, I think, when I was in college, I would have gone off and done the wildland hand crew. I would have done that for a while.
High
That was
speed
some,
gardening, man. That's rough. I've done that a couple
yeah,
of times. That's awful.
yeah, it is intense. I
It
mean,
is.
just getting out there with a whole crew for, I've had a few state deployments connected to federal, fires in Colorado, which were just, I don't know, the whole type 1 incident management thing is just super intriguing to me.
Yeah.
So that was one thing, I always thought later, it's like, because I never served in the military, so being in the first responder and doing that, but just being like one of those, you know, whether it was in Texas or California or Arizona or like, the Yosemite Park ranger that's, dropping out of a helicopter and helping people with rescues, or something like a Coast Guard thing. When you're 50 looking back, you're going, no, that would have been cool. But I'm super grateful for what I did get to do as an outdoor educator and all the trips we led and did all that. So that's probably, like if I was to go back and do something pretty hardcore, I think those would be some things. But doing what I'm doing now, I guess, is keeping me ready to go.
Good. Sometimes you look back and you think I would do all this stuff, but the journey that
Yeah,
you took to get where you're at makes you who
yeah,
you are.
yeah,
And you just can't buy that sometimes.
yeah, I agree.
This was one of the most engaging conversations. I had a personal interest in this. I was really looking forward to interviewing you. You knocked it out of the park, Scott. I really appreciate your time
Oh, thanks. It was a
explaining everything.
true, yeah, my pleasure, true joy. And I love listening to your podcast. That's been fun
Oh,
to learn
thanks.
about all the other jobs and careers that people, cool things they're
Yeah.
doing. So thanks for the opportunity and look forward to working with you.
You bet. If anybody is listening and they want to look into your canine search and rescue services, you offer training and things. Is that right?
I do.
How can they find you? What's your website, Instagram, any of that social media stuff
Yeah.
you want to put out
Yeah.
there?
So the business is called SAR Canine Training. So sark9training.com. So that's SAR K9 with a C,
Okay.
training.com. And the cool thing that just the way life works, however, whatever you believe in, SAR is my name is Scott Allen Robertshaw, and
Okay.
so SAR has been my path, and
It
so
was meant to
take
be,
that for
man. Yeah.
yeah for what it's worth. That's how the business got started. It's part name, part passion,
Right on.
uh,
Right on.
and yeah, we can help you with your dogs that are wanting to learn some skills, or if you want to do some stuff with search and rescue too.
Good deal. Are you on Instagram, Facebook? Do you have a
Yeah,
website?
all the same thing. SAR Canine Training. Yep.
Okay.
Website.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it, buddy.
yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.